Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it. Hey there, and welcome back to The Shift Show. On today's episode, I'll be answering the very first submission I received for my Dear Adriana column. I'm so excited for this, and please stay tuned for more. I got so many responses for this, so there will be many, many episodes to come. I might even be uploading them more than once a week. We'll see. So our very first one comes from Tristan, which is kind of funny because that is my husband's name, but I promise this is absolutely not my husband. He is one of those unicorn people who comes from a unicorn family where everyone is fantastic. My in-laws are wonderful people. So this is totally not him. And just throwing that out there, if anyone that knows me is listening to this, this is not him, I promise you. So let's get to the submission. So Tristan asks, I would love to hear a podcast about how to navigate a relationship with someone who is a narcissist. Background, my mom and stepdad just got a divorce because shit hit the fan basically, but she's still talking to him and putting him before her own family. We all keep trying to explain that over the last 20 plus years, he has manipulated her so much so she can't see what he's actually doing to her because she is so brainwashed by him. I'm to the point where I have to put my foot down for myself and my family to make sure my kids aren't exposed to all this BS like I had to deal with as a kid. Right. Well, first off, Tristan, thank you so much for your question. And there's a lot that I want to say. So let's just kind of start at the top where your mom and stepdad actually went ahead and got the divorce. So that is awesome. Like that is kind of step one, sort of. And, you know, the fact that she's still kind of talking to him and putting him before her own family really, really sucks. So we can't sugarcoat how much that sucks. Now, the fact that you all keep trying to explain to her that over the last 20 years, he's manipulated her, this, that, and the other, and she still can't see what he's actually doing to her because she's so brainwashed, even though she has already gone through with the divorce, is pretty common, to be honest. It's hard to kind of unfuck your mind, so to speak, when you are in that mind fuck. So the thing is that you guys have all been explaining this to her over and over and over again. I would stop doing that because you have to keep in mind she is a grown adult, and the more that you put your time and energy into explaining the obvious to her, it's just, you're not going to get anywhere, right? If you've already explained it more than a few times, which, it sounds like from your note here that you've done it multiple times, there's really no point in continuing to do this. So you saying that you're at the point where you do have to put your foot down for yourself and your family to make sure your kids are not exposed to all the bullshit like what you had to deal with as a kid is exactly where you need to be. So it's really going to be about setting boundaries with your mother at this point. So it's really amazing, first of all, before I dive into how boundaries are going to go in this type of situation, that you've broken the cycle and you're protecting your own children from this type of toxicity. So I just wanted to commend you for that. And the fact that you're able to see it that way is huge because, it can take a long time for a lot of people to see the reality for exactly what it is. And so kudos to you really for protecting your children from that type of toxicity. So your main boundaries at this point will be that if your ex-stepdad is going to be at an event or in the picture for whatever reason, you and your children are not attending. End of story. And if she, lies about it and he ends up showing up to some sort of event that you were not expecting him to be there, your goal is to literally leave. Like, you're going to be seen as an asshole. You're going to be seen as a terrible person, but you really have to be okay with that, right? Which I know is obviously easier said than done. But with someone who is still wrapped up in that kind of mindfuck, it's really all about leading by example. So you are done explaining yourself at this point. It's all about showing with your actions that you are, in fact, done without explaining yourself anymore. So when it comes to setting a boundary with a narcissist or somebody who is still wrapped up with a narcissist, doing it with your actions rather than your words is the way to go. So moving forward, I would encourage you, if your mom brings up your stepdad, starts talking about him, whatever the case may be, change the subject. Don't engage in these types of conversations with her. Let her know that, you've talked about this already and you've explained it to her already, and you're not going to be having this type of, sort of circular conversation with her moving forward. And if she's got an issue with that, that's, bit of a red flag right there. But you have to recognize your mother for the adult that she is. And she is a big girl. She's making her own decisions. She's choosing to continue to speak with her ex-husband even after the divorce, even after everything that he's put her through and you through, and, your potential siblings and, all the crap that you had to deal with as a child. So if she's not willing to see that, that makes her kind of an enabler. And the thing with enablers is that they can be just as toxic as the narcissist. So enablers are people who justify and excuse the crap that the narcissist has done. They will kind of turn a blind eye. They'll encourage you to, forgive and forget, or whatever the case may be. And so, your mom's job throughout her life was to protect you from bullshit like this. And obviously, she didn't. She chose to stay with your stepdad the entire time, 20 plus years. And now, finally, the divorce has gone through, but she's continuing to put him above everything and above her own family. So you just have to look at that as a choice that she is making. And when you kind of distance yourself from an enabler, a lot of the times I do have a theory that I have proven time and time again with many of my clients that enablers can be narcissists themselves. It's just that you're not their main target. And the fact that they're okay with these dynamics, they're okay with the abuse, they're okay with justifying, excusing, making excuses, all that kind of stuff. Something's up with that person, right? Whereas a normal person would be like, okay, cool, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, let's kind of navigate this. But an enabler is not going to do that. And that, to me, kind of is a bit of a red flag. So some alarm bells may or may not be going off at that point. I'm not saying your mother is a full-blown narcissist, but the fact that she's still putting your stepdad ahead of everybody really is a red flag. So it's really going to be about leading by example at this point, all right? There is a chance that your mom's just super, super brainwashed still, even though the divorce has happened. But it's really, once you kind of show somebody who's in a toxic or narcissistic relationship like what they're dealing with, a lot of the times they're not going to want to hear it. They won't be able to hear it. They don't want to believe it, all that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of let her go through that denial phase kind of on her own, right? Because you've done your part. You've done more than enough here. And really just doing stuff with your children that don't involve their grandparents or grandmother and ex-step-grandfather, I guess. So, I'm sure there's many of ways that you can, still do stuff with them that doesn't involve them. And if your mother wants to have a part in her grandchildren's lives, she's not to bring her ex, right? It's a pretty straightforward boundary. It's a pretty reasonable request. And, she has to start seeing it for herself. But at this point, you need to stop showing her the obvious. She has to really wake up and see what's happening. Now, this can happen in a number of ways, where your stepdad might find a new source of supply and eventually discard your mother, which could potentially very well happen in, the sort of near future. Just really depends on the full situation, but that could be something that really impacts her negatively, and then she starts to see the truth more and more, and she'll be more receptive to an actual constructive conversation about everything that's been going on for the past 20 plus years. But right now it's not constructive. It's not a constructive conversation. There's really no point in continuing to try to have that discussion with her. So yeah, that is pretty much it. I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, but when someone is really knee deep, neck deep really in that manipulation, and they can't see it for what it is, even though the breakup has happened, the divorce has gone through, the papers have been signed, the ink has dried, they are free to move on with their lives. If they're still not willing to see it, you can't force somebody to see something that they don't want to see. So your job really is to just lead with your actions, not your words. If he shows up to something, you have to be prepared to leave the situation. If she brings him to your house, for example, like that's another kind of complex sort of scenario where before she comes to your house, if you're throwing some sort of event, you would tell her ahead of time, you're not bringing your ex-husband. If you bring him, I will be asking you both to leave. End of story, right? And then if they refuse to leave, like that could be a legal thing. So that's not really something I am qualified to give advice on because I don't know the laws where you live. I am not a legal professional, but that could really become like a harassment thing in a lot of places. So something you might want to look into. But if that is not something that is of concern, then you're all good to go with just actions over words, doing stuff with your kids that don't involve the grandparents, and continuing to just continue protecting them from your ex-stepfather's toxic bullshit and nonsense, because as your child's parent, you are the one who's responsible for protecting them. And it sounds like you're really doing an amazing job at doing that. So way to go. I'm super proud of you. And yeah, it's really just about like letting go of the need to keep explaining this to her, because it's not going to go anywhere. If she's going to figure it out, she needs to figure that out on her own. And no one can really save her but herself at this point. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, and I hope you have all who is listening enjoyed this first Dear Adriana column question that I've answered. And if you would like to make a submission, feel free to follow the Google form link in the description of this episode, and stay tuned for when your next episode will air. I do have a lot of these lined up, so it may be several weeks before yours if you do submit one today, but go for it, because, I will be potentially doing more than one upload of this podcast per week if I get a crazy amount of submissions. So yeah. And another thing that I would also love to mention is that I have just created a brand new quiz on uncovering your path to freedom from narcissistic abuse. So if you are finding that you're kind of feeling blocked on your healing journey, or you haven't started it yet, or you've started it and you don't know what to do next, this quiz is really going to help you figure out what that next step is, so that you can move forward and go from not just surviving, but go right into thriving. So I have put the link for that quiz as well in the description of this podcast episode. So feel free to take it, and feel free to let me know how you found the results after you've taken it, because this is literally the first quiz I've ever taken in my life. I've ever created in my life. Rather, I've taken many quizzes in my life, but first one I've ever created. And so far the feedback's been amazing, but just in case I've totally missed the mark on anything, I would definitely love to know, and I do welcome any constructive feedback for this so I can keep improving it as time goes on and people continue taking the quiz. All right, that's it for today's episode. I will see you next time on The Shift Show, where I will be answering our next question, and I'll give you a little preview of it. pretty similar to this, actually. It's pretty similar to this. It's about narcissistic parents, it looks like. So narcissistic in-laws. So I know that's a hot topic with a lot of people. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned for that one next time here on The Shift Show. Might be in a couple of days, might be next week, but probably sooner rather than later. So I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.